Hello everybody, today I'd like to review the TT Esports Ventus X Optical RGB mouse. The Ventus X Optical is an upgrade over the initial Ventus X, which had used a laser sensor, I think if I'm not mistaken the A9500. Now this one uses the famous Pixar 3360, so we already expect good performance from that one. The mouse comes in a nice box with a lot of marketing terms on there, like the RGB lighting, 12,000 CPI, although nobody needs that, and also aerodynamically inspired design, whatever that means. But yeah, this is a design meant to catch people in bigger stores to go for those names, so I think it's fine. It's not over the top, and also it is correct, the mouse offers those features. You can also open that box, look inside there. You can see the mouse directly, have some nice information here, like about the switches that I used, and I'll go into that later on because the mouse actually uses some quality components. To start off, I'll discuss a bit about the shape of the mouse. As you can already see here, it's a similar shape to, let's say, Death Adder or EC1A or anything that is inspired by the original IME 3.0 from Microsoft. So an ergonomic design for right-handed users with 6 buttons, 2 main buttons, the wheel. This is by default a profile switch button. You can program it to anything you want in the software, and also the 2 side buttons here. Compared to the EC1A, it feels even a bit bigger to me, although they're very similar in size. But the EC1A has this soft touch. I don't even know how to call this coating, but whenever I try to grip it initially, I kind of slip off of it until my hands are properly moist, so to say, so that I can get a good grip on it. And even then, sometimes in the back area here, my palm kind of slips off. So that was something that always bugged me about the EC1A, and I could never get a comfortable grip on it. With this mouse, because of the rubber sides, whatever you may think of them, they're the same as on the newer Death Adder versions, the Death Adder Chroma and Fuji. Actually, this is quite comfortable to grip, and I really only need little force to lift the mouse. The dimensions are where you grip, the area, the width is 64 millimeters. The widest part, if you take the outline of it, is 71 millimeters wide. It's 128 millimeters high, and 42 millimeters in the height, really, dimension. The mouse comes with a weight system that I have here. There's also the weight door that you can put in. 3 weights with 4.5 grams each, and the weight drawer. I took those out because I want my mouse to be light, as light as possible. So that being said, if I put it on my scale without any of the weights, it's around 99 grams. I think you can see here maybe 100 gram, 99 grams, either way, something close to that. And if you put all the weights in and the weight drawer, you're up to 160 grams. So with all the weights inside, the mouse has roughly the same weight as the Rocket Cone EMP, which is a similar shaped mouse. It's a different shape, but it's also an ergonomic shape, and it's rather big. So with this one, you can actually get it down to 99 grams. The Rocket is cable suspended 116 grams, and you can't go lower from that. And if you compare them side by side in your hand, the Ventus X actually feels a lot lighter. It also feels lighter than some smaller mouse that might be 90 grams because of the dimension that you have in your hand. It's a big piece, and you kind of would expect it to weigh more when you look at it. So that's a very positive point. I think they really kept the weight low, which is something I can appreciate. It's not as low as, say, the Logitech G403, because this one is, I think, if I remember correctly, 83 grams. Yeah, on my scale. But this one is a bit, I already optimized this one. I think initially it was 87 or 88 grams, but I took out also here the weight door, the magnets that are there to keep the weight door locked in, and I also switched out the cable on this one to a paracord cable, which might also shave off, I don't know, half a gram. So that is actually probably the lightest ergonomic mouse that you can get currently, but it's also a bit smaller. If you put them side by side, you can see here that the G403 is considerably less length to it, so that's also to be considered here. But I really like the weight and the feel of the mouse here. Now let's go over to the sensor performance. I'll go over this just for completion because everybody already expects when you hear the 3360 sensor, you know there will be good performance, and there actually is. I also tracked the CPI values, the actual values for the steps. You can set those steps in the software to anything you like in steps of 100. So those are just the usual steps that I tested: 400, 800, 1600, 3200, and 5000 CPI. And for all of those, the actual values were above the proclaimed value. So there was around 4.5, 5% more, which means it's not really bad because it's a constant value, so you'll get used to it anyway. But if you come from a mouse that is slower cursor, like for example the Zowie EC1A again, this one is, if you set it to 800, it will actually be 780 to 790, something like that. And then you switch to this one on 800, your cursor will feel faster, just so that you know that is a possibility. But it's not bad in itself. Let's try how fast the sensor can track. Probably much faster than I can move, because I might be able to maybe get, oh, that's frequency, we want velocity. Yeah, I got a 5 meter per second in that swipe. We take out the first data point and it's better to see. So we have here 5 meter per second tracking without any problems, without any issues. And if we go back to frequency, frequency is also rather stable, or let's say this is the normal frequency for my system. So everything good here, just as expected. I'll also go with, just for completion, over drawing lines in paint to see if there is any angle snapping enabled. As you can see here, I can draw a pretty neat circle without any edges, so there is no angle snapping at any point here. Like I said in my previous reviews, those steps here, that is not actually angle snapping. Also here, it's just the cursor has to decide between 2 pixels, and the curvature is so small that it always ends up on those pixels. That is not the cursor being forced, it's just the cursor really being moved in a very straight way. We might go back into Paint later on, because I think in the software you might be able to set angle snapping. I have to look into that later on. Okay, now let's go over to the speed-related accuracy variance. Also to be expected to be very good because of the sensor choice here. But let's try it out. We can see here in the top right corner of the screen, you see the angles from the show pause command in Team Fortress. The second value in the middle is the now minus 1.64, which means I think it's the radians that or it might even be degree, that I'm off from the starting position, which was 0, 0, 0. But also you can see here how close I am to where I started. I think that's really close for something that I do manually here. This is even closer. Also very close, so this is actually a really good result. and I guess most of the times I'm off, that it might be due to the nature of the testing that I do here, because I do manual movements of the mouse. So if in any way here I kind of do this, twist the mouse and then go back, I'm off by a lot. So just to say that it might even be more accurate than my test portrays. So if I really were to move in an exactly straight line with the machine, the result might be even better. But anyway, you end up in a pretty tight circle, so the sensor performance is really good. Now, after that, let's talk a bit about the buttons of the mouse. For this, I will go back to full screen of my camera. The main buttons have Omron switches, Omron D2, FC, F7, and something. So the standard Omron switches really, but I think they are good. Some people really want to have the Japanese Omron switches, but for me those are good enough. The clicks are fine. You get nice feedback. Also, despite the shell, it's not too bad. It's always better to have separate buttons, like you can see here on the G403, because then you don't have the force of bending the plastic to actuate the switch. So that kind of gives a better click feedback if you have separate buttons, but it's not too bad. And I think if you give the mouse a few hours to adjust to the force of the click, then it's fine. So main button's good. The wheel is also very good. It has a similar design to the Scream 1 that I reviewed yesterday, whereas the sides are smooth and transparent so that the light can shine through. But with this one, I actually didn't have the problem to not be able to scroll from the sides, which might be because of the design in general, or because they use, in my opinion, better encoder. They use an Alps encoder for the mouse wheel, and that to me has always been the best mouse encoder possible. So very good choice here. I can also even show you, if I go back to this, I can show you a picture of the internals of the Ventus X RGB optical. Here you can see the main mouse switch. You see here the Alps encoder that is holding the wheel, and you can also see in the front the blue switch, which is a side button switch. I don't exactly know what kind of switch that is. Might be a Zippy or some other type of switch, but yeah, they were all right. The side buttons feel okay. No problem with them. Also, you can see here that they took kind of a Logitech approach with side button separation, in that there is a small gap between the back button and the front button, so you can, without looking, you can always tell, this is the front button and here's the back button, which makes it easier to actuate. So that's really good, I think. Now going to the button latency test. For this, I need to get back to my desktop view, and then let's see the key response test. I will try this against the Zowie ZA11, because that is currently the other mouse plugged into my system. And I would expect the Ventus X to win, because as I said, the Zowies don't have the fastest button response. But let's see. Yeah, A in this case is the Ventus X, because A means the left mouse button was used, and I slammed the left mouse button of the Ventus X against the right mouse button of the ZA11. So as expected, the Ventus X wins here. It has around 4 to 6 milliseconds faster response time, which means that it's probably around 3 milliseconds slower than Logitech mice, which is to me the gold standard of buttons currently. But that's fine. It's just a little off, and maybe we can go into into that timing a bit more, because if I now look into the software of the mouse, this one actually has software where you can set up your mouse, you can set up the lighting, you can set up all the buttons, what you want from them. This is my current profile that I use. There seemed to be some bug in the software that you can't use profile 1, or also I have to hit apply. When I hit profile 1, it says profile 2 still. But that doesn't really bother me. You still have 4 profiles left that you can use. You can set here the buttons, what to do with the scroll wheel, the scroll click, and I set this button to switch CPI. And if you have the software open, it also tells you what the current level is in a kind of overlay, which I think is pretty neat. Especially if you use more levels and you for some applications this is useful to you, then I think this is nice. I use level 1 obviously most of the time. It also switches color, so you can see level 2 for me lights up in yellow, and then it goes back to the regular red, so you can also see just by clicking the mouse which CPI step you currently have on. You can also change the lighting options to have a spectrum running of colors so that it cycles through. By the way, I think this back part here, despite looking a bit weird in the beginning, it actually doesn't feel bad to the touch, and it might even help if you have a sweaty palm. This might actually help. I've set this to pulse, so I have a pulsating light effect and also in red, but you can choose whatever you want here. You can also turn the lights off, of course, if you don't like any lights here. Now for the performance tab, here are the 2 CPI levels that I have set. I don't know what sensor off means or why you would do that, but you can turn it off. So if you want to have a mouse that doesn't track, feel free to do this. You can adjust the lift-off distance. You can also turn on angle snapping here, that was something that I remembered. Now let's go back in Paint and see what this does now. How it looks. Yeah, it's kind of... I think you can see where the angle snapping kicks in. So it's a mild form of angle snapping, but there's a clear difference to angle snapping on and off. Let me put it to off again. And now try again. So if you like angle snapping or want to have some light form of angle snapping, you can enable this here. Also, the button response time is set to 4 milliseconds, which is the lowest you can set it. For some reason, you can set it to 32 milliseconds. Let's do that now. Delete this. And let's try the key response timing again. I get out the Zowie again, and let's see what happens now. Mesh them against each other. Oh, see? Now the Zowie wins by 20 milliseconds. I don't really see the purpose of that. Why would you want to have a slower button unless you have a broken switch that is kind of actuating on and off again all the time, and you want... But still, then I don't see the purpose of this. I don't know why they did this, but yeah, the mouse comes initially with its thing. What is it set to? So the bar is somewhere over here, so probably 8 milliseconds. I set this to the lowest value possible, and then just don't worry about it again. You can also enable different values for X and Y axis if you want this, but I wouldn't recommend it, just so that you can. You can also put in macros. I didn't bother with this because I never use macros, but so if you use this, you have the ability to do so. You can also link to programs. I think in this you can set it that it has a different profiles for different games, for example. So I think the software is offers a lot of things to customize. It's a bit confusing at times. For example, you have this better mode. When switching to better mode, the illumination effects would change according to the clicking frequency. I don't know. Let's try. I don't see any change in illumination, so I don't know what this does. There is no further explanation to this, so I'll go back to normal. I don't know, maybe someone can enlighten me on that. I didn't really bother with it. And some of the namings are quite weird. For example, rotate. You think about what does rotate mean in this regard, but it's really you have to take sensitivity and then you have temporary, I don't even know, level up, level down. So you can set this one button just to increase sensitivity and then never go back to it. On the fly, I didn't try, and rotate plus and minus just means you cycle through your CPI steps. So I would call this cycle, but they call it rotate. It takes kind of a bit, yeah, getting used to, I'd say. So I didn't change anything. Also, you can see here, you can set it to launch a program. You can disable the buttons. I don't even know what T key means. Those are macros, but I'll just keep it at default. So backwards and forward buttons, and there you go. So the software is all right. I think can't complain about the software. What is more to say about the mouse? Yeah, the feet and the cable. Maybe the last points to talk about. Let me go back to the bigger screen with the camera. The feet are actually rather large, but also have straight edges, so they're not rounded, as you can see here. This is something that I don't like too much because it kind of feels like, you know, sometimes you get if you angle the mouse just slightly, it's scratching a bit. So I would prefer to have them rounded. And because I'm so used to hyperglides personally now, I'd probably switch them to just having 4 small hyperglides in the corners and be done with it. That should do the trick. The cable is a braided cable. It's also rather stiff, but not as stiff as the Scream 1 cable that I tried yesterday, for example. But of course, it has this kind of dragging effect that you expect with a cable like this. But it's better in that it doesn't bend over itself too much, so it didn't cause me as much trouble or discomfort as the Scream 1 did. Obviously, it can be improved upon by simply going to something like Zowie cables, for example. That's something that you can use and can sell without violating FCC regulations. So there's that. And I think that sums it up. My thoughts on the Ventus X. As a verdict for the mouse, I'd say for the $50, I think I bought it for €50, but it should be around for $50 too. This is a really good mouse because it uses quality components. It has a good feel to it. The performance is very good. There's software so you can adjust it to your needs, and it also feels like quality. I was quite surprised. It was the first mouse by Thermaltake that I tested, and I'd say this is a really good mouse. The only thing that keeps me from this being a main driver is that I don't really like ambidextrous mice anymore, but I would recommend this to anyone who likes the EC1A. Try this one first because you get it for less and it has better performance. And the only thing that might take you off are maybe if you dislike those sides, but that's really it. I think it's a great mouse, so it's a recommendation from my side. I hope you enjoyed my review. If you did, please leave a like. Also, comment down below on anything I can improve. I tried to improve sound quality. I hope it worked. I switched to a different microphone. But anything else that comes up that you think can be improved upon, please let me know. That's it, and have a nice day.